All right, good morning again, 488 folks. We want to talk a little bit about chapter 12 here. And what we're talking about is company culture, okay? And I don't know if there's like a standard for a company culture. Um, I've worked in, I don't know, 5 or 6 organizations now, and I think that there are better than others, no doubt. But what is bad is if it's weak. Okay, so we're going to get into that in a second. All right. But I think the first thing to do is take a look at what the author did and try to understand what cultures really are and what they're trying to unfold. So basically, we're looking at the core values of a company. Okay? What, not their value propositions, but the values that they hold, their leadership. Are they ethical? Is honesty and having a high ethical standard important? Number one. Number two, is performance and accountability important? Are they communicating that? Are they a company that is fair and reasonable when it comes to employee performance? In other words, can you have a bad day? Can you have 2 bad days? Can you have a bad month? And be coached and brought back into a higher performing level. These are cultural things, okay? How does the company handle adversity? So, how does the company handle times that are bad? All right, look what happened in the United States, well, actually the world, in 2008. When the U.S. seems to have a hiccup, the rest of the world seems to cough. Don't forget that. So, in 2008, 2009, we were really dead here, and so was the rest of the world. The company that I worked for as a intermediary employment while I was writing my dissertation, based out of Germany, during those really tough times, the company had 3,000 employees approximately that they could have laid off, I think, a third of those, so 1,000. Instead of laying off that 1,000, they put them to work, cleaning all their machines, cleaning all of their manufacturing bays, the buildings, the grounds. They kept them all employed. That's a cultural thing, okay? I think companies in America do that, some, but many don't. And one of the reasons is we pay into employment insurance or unemployment insurance so that if tough times happen, we can put our employees on unemployment. Not good pay for the employee, not a good result, okay? So what they did in Germany was pretty cool. That was a cultural thing. Never cut their pay, just put them to work doing something else. So it's important to understand, what do they do in adversity? Um, is their culture a growth culture? Is their culture just to go day to day and win the battle day to day? Okay. Is their culture to spend as little as possible, and are they really tight with their money and very frugal to a point where it's the culture? These are things you have to look at, okay? Now, when they hire employees, what are they looking for? Are they looking for people that fit? Okay, Stryker down in Kalamazoo is really focused on whether employees will fit in the organization. They want top performers, top producers, energetic people. You'll get screened in a phone interview if you don't answer questions the right way. And if they don't hear the right amount of enthusiasm and the right amount of, we'll just call it positive responses. So they're very critical about who they bring in that organization. And there's a lot of companies now doing the same thing. When I did go to work for the company in Germany, I had to take a personality profile. Now, it was more than that. It was far beyond just a personality profile. It was a behavioral profile. It took about 4 hours to complete the thing. And that's how they vet out employees that won't fit their culture. Okay? Now, interestingly, with that organization, the culture in Germany was a bit different than the culture in the United States. The culture in the United States was not as good as Germany because the U.S. president was just not quite as organized as the folks back in Germany. And I'll leave it at that. All right. So the culture here was one of high turnover, okay, and high expectations, okay. High expectations aren't a problem if you're supporting the bottom end with high amounts of support, planning, systemized approaches. You understand? So that's another cultural inference that you have to kind of gauge. Are you that company that just wants performance and you turn them and burn them and you give them as much as you think that you should give them in terms of support and tools to perform their job? So these are all cultural things. And this is an example, actually, that was a good example of a weak culture, all right? The employees that they hired were pretty high level. But the problem is they didn't walk the talk here in the U.S. In Germany, they did. Companies like General Electric, awesome. High cultural values. They get high performers and they give you a high standard of support and capability to get your job done, which is beautiful. Very systemized, systematic processes. Okay? So when we're talking culture, we're not just talking about ethical, reasonable, from the premise of, are you honest? We're talking about things way beyond just values. It's your approach. It's the upper management's approach to achieving its goals. Okay? So is the culture that culture whereas, they want top performance and they're going to give you the support to get there? That's what you'll see in companies like Whirlpool. You'll see it in Stryker, Eaton, some of these larger companies, Kellogg, Pepsi, Coca-Cola. Very systemized, very supportive. They've learned over the years this is the way to do things. They have a strong culture. All right, so another thing that's important is the story. So, the story is important because there's a historical premise to the organization, and it was the same thing for the company I worked for, Arberg. That company was a family-owned business, and the grandfather that started it was a prisoner of war in World War II, and his name was Arthur, and he lived in Lossberg, Germany, which is in the Black Forest. And so all over his prison cell, he wrote Arthur of Lossberg, Arthur of Lossberg. He eventually was released and went back to Lossberg, and he started a small company called Arberg. So he combined those two names. The company started as a surgical instruments manufacturing company. So Lossberg was in the Black Forest where all the most awesome tool makers in the world lived. Between tools and clocks, that's what they made. So long story short, that's how that organization started. And there was a story about how it ascended itself into machines and robotics. And today its footprint is 2.5 miles square foot. It's number one in Germany, in the country, for its non-use of natural resources. It's only second to BMW in terms of size of employees. So it's an amazingly wealthy organization. I loved it. If I could have lived in Germany, I might not have came into teaching because I love that company back there. But anyway, long story short, they had a strong culture. They had a good story. Okay? Now, it's hard to do this on a multinational level and keep your culture. So here in the United States, it was weak. And I belonged to an organization here where the corporate headquarters was in the U.S. and we had weak cultures in our wholly owned organizations throughout the world too. So we had some weak cultures in Mexico, we had them in China, and I think we also had in Hong Kong. And the reason why they were weak is because they just didn't have the work ethic that you were seeing us arrive at in the United States. And it's hard when you're looking at a multinational company to be able to keep that up because you're trying to fit into the local norms too. So it's very tricky. And I can tell you this, here in the United States, we work real hard here in the Midwest. Out in California, it's a little bit different. I'm not saying they don't work hard, but they're not nearly as at it as we are. They're not getting into work at 4 in the morning. I'll leave it at that. All right. So these are cultural differences, even in the United States, that you kind of have to deal with. So we had a plant in California, and the efficiency and effectiveness coming out of that plant was much different. And it was the native culture in the area that I had to deal with. So it was interesting. All right. So going back to values. And how you position yourself as an organization, what performers you want, how much support you're going to give your performers, etc. Important. The story's important always, no matter what. There's always a company story. Hopefully it has a good one. Take a look at Tyco with Dennis Kowalski. I actually felt the effect of that. Shop that I was a partner in. Poor culture, poor leadership. They were crooks. All of them. All of them had a history of stealing. Dennis had a history of stealing. Stole from Tyco. The company that I owned was, we had $1.8 million on the books to them, and I got a call that said, hey, the SEC won't let us pay you for about 8 months. That's going to crush a company that has $40,000 to $50,000 a week in payroll. Anyway, we got through it. But that's how bad that can be. They had a weak culture, all right? So strong is this. It looks like this. Strong is I'm communicating what our values are. I'm communicating what I expect. Take a look at some of your strong, I hate to do this, football teams, okay? Today, I mean, if it's football season, it's easy, right? So look at what these great teams do. They're communicating well with their players. They're communicating exactly what they need to do and what's expected of them. They have high standards and high moral standards and ethical standards and performance standards. They are good people from head to toe. Okay, in most cases, all right? There are a few teams out there that are not, I understand, and I know some of you are laughing. But in most cases, they have very high standards, all right? So it's important. And you'll see that in the workplace too. Okay, now, if you go looking for cracks in that armor, you're going to find them